Layla shuffled through the bustling streets of New Avalon, the city of reinvention. Everywhere she turned, glowing billboards displayed the faces of the rich and famous, their flawless skin, and perfect smiles promising a life she could never hope to achieve. The ads for face shift technologies were particularly hard to ignore. Be anyone. Live your best face. The slogan taunted her as she clutched her portfolio tightly, heading to yet another gallery, in the hopes of finding someone who believed in her work. Inside the gallery, her paintings hung in a dimly lit corner, overshadowed by more prominent displays. Her art was raw and emotional, a series of portraits capturing human vulnerability, but no one cared. Art in New Avalon wasn't judged by skill or depth. It was judged by the face behind the canvas. Influencers with perfect smiles and millions of followers dominated the gallery's prime spots, their shallow but visually stunning pieces stealing the spotlight. Layla tried to ignore the whispers around her as patrons glanced her way. Great technique, but she doesn't have the face for success, one man muttered to his companion. Layla's face burned with shame, and she excused herself, retreating to the corner of the room where no one would notice her. By the end of the night, her paintings were untouched, and she walked home feeling invisible. Back in her cramped apartment, she threw her portfolio on the floor and slumped onto the couch. She knew she was talented, but talent wasn't enough in a world obsessed with appearances. Her phone buzzed, and she opened it to see an ad for Face Shift, its sleek interface glowing in the dim room. For a hefty fee, she could rent the face of Naomi Quinn, the world's most beloved celebrity. Naomi's flawless features were known across the globe, her beauty both timeless and otherworldly. Layla hesitated. The idea felt wrong, inauthentic. But then she thought about the man's comment, the empty gallery, and her stagnant career. What if a better face was the key to unlocking her potential? What if she could finally be noticed? Before she could overthink it, she tapped the screen, authorizing the payment. The system confirmed her booking. Naomi Quinn's face will be available for 1 week. Enjoy your transformation. The process was seamless. Layla stepped into the Face Shift pod, a high-tech booth that scanned her features and overlaid Naomi's face onto hers, using advanced neural mapping and skin grafts. When the procedure was complete, she looked in the mirror and gasped. The person staring back at her was unrecognizable. Her cheekbones were higher, her skin flawless, her eyes sparkling with a confidence she'd never known. The next morning, Layla attended another gallery event, this time under her new identity. Heads turned as she walked in, her striking beauty commanding attention. People flocked to her paintings, praising her talent and showering her with compliments. For the first time, Layla felt seen, and it was intoxicating. But beneath the surface, a sense of unease lingered. The face in the mirror wasn't hers. It was borrowed, a mask that could slip at any moment. And as much as she loved the attention, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was living someone else's life. That night, Layla's phone buzzed with a notification from Face Shift. Her stomach dropped as she read the message. Alert, original face unavailable. Please contact support for assistance. Panic set in as she realized the implications. Without her original face, she had no legal identity. She wasn't just borrowing someone else's face, she had lost her own. Layla stared at the notification on her screen, her heart racing. She tried to call Face Shift's customer service line, but it was an endless loop of automated responses. For general inquiries, press 1. For technical support, press 2. She pressed every option, but none led to a human operator. Her frustration mounted as she realized how helpless she was. Without her original face in the system, she had no way to verify her identity. Everything in New Avalon was tied to biometric data, from her bank accounts to her apartment access. Without her face, she was effectively invisible. The next morning, she attempted to go about her day as usual, but the cracks in her rented identity began to show. At a cafe, her payment was declined because the system didn't recognize her. When she tried to access her apartment, the door refused to unlock. Identity not recognized, the smart lock repeated in its monotone voice. Layla banged on the door in frustration, but no one answered. Her neighbors wouldn't recognize her as Naomi Quinn, and even if they did, they wouldn't believe her story. By evening, Layla found herself wandering the city, her anxiety growing with each passing hour. Her reflection in store windows seemed to mock her. Beautiful, Perfect. And utterly false. She tried to contact FaceShift again, but the automated responses were no help. We are unable to process your request at this time, the system replied each time she tried to escalate her issue. As night fell, she found herself in a seedy part of the city, following rumors she'd overheard about others who had lost their faces. A dark alley led her to an underground bar filled with outcasts and misfits. Most of them wore crude masks or hoods to hide their disfigured or stolen faces. Here, she met Caleb, a disheveled programmer who had been living off the grid since his face was stolen 6 months ago. They don't care about you, Caleb said bitterly when Layla explained her situation. FaceShift isn't just a cosmetic service. It's a front for something much bigger. They're stealing identities and selling them on the black market. Layla's stomach churned. But why? What do they gain from it? Power, Caleb replied. In this city, your face is your life. Without it, you're nothing. And they can use your identity to do whatever they want. Steal, commit crimes, even replace you entirely. Layla's fear turned to anger. She couldn't let this happen. She had to find her face and reclaim her identity. Caleb mentioned a group of underground hackers who had been investigating FaceShift for years. They might be able to help, he said, but they don't work for free. Be ready to pay up. Before Layla could ask more, she felt a strange sensation, as if someone was watching her. She turned and froze. In the shadows of the bar, a figure stepped forward, its movements eerily familiar. It took Layla a moment to realize why. The person was wearing her face. The figure stepped out of the shadows, and Layla's breath caught in her throat. It was her face, her real face, staring back at her. But the expression was cold, lifeless, and unnervingly detached. For a moment, she froze, unsure of whether to confront the imposter or run. Her instinct took over when the figure's hand darted to its side. Pulling out a sleek, metallic baton, Layla bolted. She pushed her way out of the underground bar and into the neon-lit streets of New Avalon. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as she ducked into a side alley, trying to lose the figure in the maze of backstreets. Her rented face, Naomi Quinn's flawless features, was a double-edged sword. It drew too much attention, and she knew the imposter wouldn't let her escape easily. Eventually, she found herself crouched behind a row of dumpsters, gasping for air. The imposter hadn't followed her, but her mind raced with questions. Who was that person? Why did they have her face? And more importantly, how could she get it back? The next morning, she met Caleb at a hidden cafe frequented by those who lived on the fringes of society. He seemed unsurprised when she described the encounter. That wasn't just some random thief, he said, stirring his coffee absently. That was a plant. FaceShift uses people like them to enforce their control. If you get too close to the truth, they send your face after you. Layla shuddered. The idea of someone else using her face as a weapon was more horrifying than anything she could have imagined. What do I do? She asked. Caleb leaned closer, lowering his voice. There's a hacker named Theo. He's been tracking FaceShift for years, and he knows more about their operation than anyone. But he's paranoid as hell and won't help unless he knows you're serious. How do I find him? Follow the black networks. Theo's signal pops up in encrypted forms. You'll need to prove yourself before he even talks to you. Layla spent the next few days navigating the city's digital underworld, using Caleb's guidance to track Theo. Finally, she found him in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of New Avalon. Theo was younger than she expected, with a sharp jawline and a cocky demeanor that didn't match the gravity of his work. You must be desperate if you came all the way here, he said, leaning back in his chair. Screens surrounded him, displaying lines of code and surveillance footage from FaceShift facilities. I need my face back, Layla said bluntly, and I want to expose FaceShift for what they're doing. Theo raised an eyebrow. Ambitious. But it's not just your face. FaceShift has hundreds, thousands of faces in their system. Yours is just one of many they've stolen to sell on the black market. What do you mean? Sell? Layla demanded. Theo spun one of his monitors toward her. It displayed a live feed of a secret FaceShift auction. Faces were being bid on by anonymous elites, their names hidden behind encrypted tags. This is what they're really doing, Theo explained. They're not just offering cosmetic changes. They're selling identities to the highest bidder. Politicians, criminals, corporate spies, they all want clean slates or new masks. Layla stared at the screen in horror. How do we stop them? Theo smirked. We don't stop them. We destroy them. He laid out a plan to infiltrate FaceShift's headquarters. The facility housed a massive server farm where all stolen faces were stored. If they could breach the server and upload a virus, it would erase the entire database and shut down the company's operations. But the plan was risky, and Layla would need to use Naomi Quinn's face to gain access. Layla stood outside FaceShift's gleaming headquarters, her heart pounding as she adjusted the hood of her jacket. Theo had outfitted her with a small device disguised as a bracelet, which would give him remote access to the building's systems. The plan was simple on paper: pose as Naomi Quinn, infiltrate the server room, and upload the virus. But Layla couldn't shake the feeling that things would go horribly wrong. She entered the building, her face instantly recognized by the biometric scanners as Naomi Quinn. Employees nodded respectfully as she passed, and security guards stepped aside without question. The power of Naomi's identity was intoxicating, but it also made Layla feel like a fraud. Every step she took felt like a betrayal of herself. As she reached the lower levels of the building, Theo's voice crackled through her earpiece. You're doing great. The server room is 3 doors down on your left. And Layla, stay cool. They're watching. Layla pushed open the heavy steel door to the server room and was immediately struck by the hum of machinery. Rows of servers stretched out before her, glowing faintly in the dim light. At the center of the room was a terminal with a biometric lock. It required her original face to access, but Theo had anticipated this. He had hacked the system to accept Naomi Quinn's face instead. She placed her hand on the scanner, holding her breath as the lock verified her identity. The terminal beeped, and the screen lit up. Theo's virus was ready for upload, and Layla's fingers hovered over the keyboard. But before she could complete the process, the door behind her slammed shut. Well, what do we have here? A voice drawled. Layla turned to see Naomi Quinn herself standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 security guards. The real Naomi was just as stunning as her rented face, but there was something cold and calculating about her presence. Using my face to sneak into my own building? Bold, Naomi said, her lips curling into a smirk. But did you really think I wouldn't notice? Layla backed away, her mind racing for an escape plan. Naomi stepped closer, her voice low and menacing. You're not the first to try this, but you might be the last. You see, I don't just own FaceShift. I am FaceShift. Everything about this operation runs through me, and you're nothing but a glitch in the system. Naomi signaled her guards, who lunged toward Layla. She dodged, grabbing a loose server cable and whipping it toward one of them. The room erupted into chaos as Layla fought to protect herself, while Theo shouted instructions through her earpiece. Hit the override button on the terminal, Theo yelled. It'll trigger an EMP and fry the system. Layla made a desperate dash for the terminal, slamming her hand on the override button. The room filled with a deafening hum as the servers began to overload. Naomi screamed in rage, and Layla barely escaped as the building's alarms blared. Layla returned to Theo's warehouse, her body bruised but her resolve unshaken. We're not done, she said, her voice steely. Naomi is still out there, and FaceShift is still operational. Theo nodded, already working on a new plan. We'll need to hit them where it hurts, their public image. If we can expose what they're doing to the world, they'll crumble. Over the next few weeks, Layla and Theo compiled evidence from FaceShift's servers, leaking incriminating data to journalists and whistleblower sites. The public was horrified by the revelations: stolen identities, black market sales, and the manipulation of entire industries. Protests erupted, and FaceShift's stock plummeted. But Naomi Quinn wasn't one to go down without a fight. She released a statement denying the allegations, framing Layla as a disgruntled user, trying to sabotage the company. Layla knew she had to do more than expose the truth. She had to confront Naomi one last time. The final showdown took place in a hidden FaceShift facility on the outskirts of the city. Layla infiltrated the building with Theo's help, navigating a labyrinth of security measures. When she finally found Naomi, the two faced off in a tense confrontation. You think you've won? Naomi sneered. This technology is bigger than you, bigger than me. You can't stop progress. This isn't progress, Layla shot back. It's exploitation, and it ends now. The battle was fierce, but Layla ultimately prevailed, uploading a final virus that wiped FaceShift's servers and exposed Naomi's personal involvement in the conspiracy. Naomi fled, her empire in ruins, but Layla knew she wasn't gone for good. In the aftermath, Layla reclaimed her face, but the experience left her changed. The scars from her journey were visible, but they became a part of her identity, a testament to her resilience. She returned to her art, channeling her pain and triumph into a new series that captured the complexities of identity and self-worth. Her work gained recognition, not because of her appearance, but because of its raw, emotional honesty. For the first time in her life, Layla felt truly seen. As she stood in front of a mirror, studying her reflection, she smiled. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and that was enough. Months had passed since FaceShift's empire had crumbled, but the scars of its influence lingered across New Avalon. Layla had watched from the sidelines as protests erupted and lawsuits piled up against the company. Survivors of the identity theft came forward in droves, sharing harrowing stories of lost faces and stolen lives. For many, there was no resolution. Their original identities were gone, erased forever. Layla, however, had reclaimed hers. She touched the edges of her reflection in the mirror, tracing the faint scars that remained after the face recovery procedure. They were a stark reminder of her journey, not just of what she'd endured, but of who she had become. Her reflection was no longer perfect, but it was real. For the first time in her life, she valued that more than anything. Her new art exhibit, The Mask in the Mirror, opened to a packed gallery. Each painting depicted faces in various stages of distortion and reconstruction, capturing the raw emotion of identity lost and reclaimed. Critics called her work groundbreaking, a visceral commentary on humanity's obsession with perfection. But for Layla, it wasn't about the accolades. It was about telling the story that so many like her couldn't. As the gallery buzzed with energy, a young woman approached Layla, her eyes wide with admiration. "Your work is incredible," she said. "I've never seen anything like it." Layla smiled warmly. "Thank you." "What drew you to it?" The woman hesitated, glancing around nervously before leaning in. I was a victim of FaceShift too. I thought I was alone until I saw your story. You gave me hope." Layla's chest tightened, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. She placed a reassuring hand on the woman's shoulder. "You're not alone," she said softly, "and you're stronger than you think." Later that night, as the gallery emptied, Layla sat by one of her paintings, lost in thought. The battle against FaceShift had taken so much from her, but it had also given her a purpose. She wasn't just an artist anymore. She was a voice for those who had been silenced. A faint chime from her phone broke her reverie. It was a message from Theo. "You should see this." Attached was a news article with the headline, "Naomi Quinn spotted in Europa District, new identity suspected." Layla's stomach churned. She had known Naomi wouldn't disappear for good, but seeing proof of her return reignited a flicker of fear. FaceShift was gone, but its technology was still out there, waiting to be exploited again. And Naomi Quinn was nothing if not resourceful. For a moment, Layla considered ignoring the message, retreating into the new life she had built for herself. But then she thought of the young woman at the gallery, and all the others who had suffered in silence. She couldn't turn her back on them, not now, not ever. She replied to Theo with a single word, "Where?" Layla stood and faced her reflection once more. The fight wasn't over, but this time, she was ready. Her face might have been stolen once, but her identity, her true self, was unshakable, and she would ensure that no one else would have to endure what she had. With renewed determination, she grabbed her coat and headed out into the city. The night stretched before her, full of possibility and danger, but she no longer feared what was to come. She was Layla, and she was no one's mask. The world might have been obsessed with perfection, but Layla knew the truth. It was the flaws that made her unstoppable. The lights in the grand auditorium of Luxora's headquarters dimmed, casting a metallic sheen over the high-tech display of the stage. A massive banner hovered in the air, courtesy of Luxora's holographic projectors displaying the product everyone had come to see. Eternal reflection, See the perfect you. The crowd murmured in anticipation, the air electric with excitement. Emma sat in the back, her arms crossed. She wasn't here to bask in Luxora's latest triumph, she was here because she'd had no choice. Her boss insisted that all employees attend the launch to support the company's vision. Emma smirked bitterly. Vision. The only thing Luxora cared about was selling dreams at any cost. The company's charismatic CEO, Damien Luxor, took the stage, his perfectly sculpted face illuminated in the soft glow of the holographic banner. He was a product of the mirrors himself. Emma knew. Luxora had been the first to test its capabilities, refining his own perfect self until he became a walking advertisement for his invention. Welcome to the future, Damien began, his voice rich and commanding. For centuries, humans have sought ways to better themselves. We diet, we exercise, we wear makeup, we filter our photos. But what if you could wake up every morning and see the best version of yourself? No effort required. Ladies and gentlemen, the eternal reflection mirror isn't just a product, it's a revolution. The crowd erupted into applause. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes narrowing at the polished figure on stage. She'd spent months coding the neural network that powered these mirrors. While the product's publicized goal was harmless, displaying an AI-generated idealized reflection, Emma had discovered something far more sinister in the back-end systems. Lines of encrypted code buried deep in the software hinted at a secondary purpose, one she hadn't been able to decrypt yet. As the presentation continued, Damien unveiled a sleek, full-length mirror on stage. It gleamed like liquid silver, its surface rippling briefly as the AI booted up. A volunteer from the audience, a young woman with nervous energy, was invited to step forward. The woman glanced into the mirror, her breath catching as her reflection morphed subtly. Her hair became shinier, her skin flawless, her figure subtly enhanced. She looked radiant, almost superhuman. The crowd gasped in awe. Emma felt a pang of unease. It's too perfect. Behold, Damien exclaimed, gesturing toward the woman. This is what you could see every day. Confidence, empowerment, the very best of yourself staring back at you. The audience applauded again, louder this time. The woman on stage blinked at her reflection, seemingly mesmerized. Emma noticed something odd. The woman's breathing had quickened, and a faint sheen of sweat glistened on her brow. Her legs trembled slightly as she stepped back from the mirror. Emma made a mental note. Physical exhaustion? That's not normal. As the launch concluded and the audience swarmed toward the demonstration mirrors set up in the hall, Emma slipped out of her seat. She didn't need to see more of Luxora's flashy theatrics. She had work to do. Back in her tiny office, far from the glamour of the launch party, Emma pulled up the mirror's back-end system on her computer. Lines of code scrolled rapidly across the screen. She navigated to the encrypted module she'd discovered weeks ago. The decryption software was still running, but progress was slow. She tapped her pen anxiously against the desk. Whatever Luxora was hiding, it was buried deep. Too deep. All right, let's try a different angle, she muttered, accessing the energy consumption logs. Her brow furrowed as she scanned the data. The mirrors consumed far more energy than their specs suggested they should, almost as if they were siphoning power from somewhere else. Where's it all going? Emma whispered. She traced the energy flow to an off-site server farm listed under a dummy corporation. Pulling up its coordinates, she froze. The location was under Luxora Tower itself. Emma leaned back in her chair, a knot tightening in her stomach. The mirrors weren't just consuming electricity, they were tapping into something deeper. But what? Late that night, when the office was silent and her colleagues had left for the launch after-party, Emma decided to test the mirror for herself. In the privacy of the lab, she stood in front of a prototype unit. The sleek silver surface shimmered to life as the AI activated, scanning her features with a soft hum. Her reflection appeared. It was her, but not her. The woman in the mirror was stunning. Her beauty elevated to an almost divine level. Her hair fell in perfect waves. Her green eyes glowed with an otherworldly brightness, and her posture exuded confidence she didn't feel. Emma stared, transfixed. It was intoxicating, but then something strange happened. The reflection tilted its head, its expression softening in a way Emma hadn't moved. She stepped closer to the mirror, and so did the reflection, but its eyes locked onto hers, almost as if it were aware. Emma, the whisper sent a chill down her spine. Her reflection's lips moved, but she hadn't spoken. Emma stumbled back, her breath quickening. The mirror's surface rippled again, and for a brief moment, she saw something beneath her reflection, dark shapes, like tendrils, twisting and coiling in a void. And then it was gone, replaced by her perfect reflection once more. Her heart pounded as she shut down the mirror and pulled the power cord. She backed away, her mind racing. This isn't just a mirror. It's something else entirely. Emma barely slept that night. The memory of her perfect reflection, whispering her name, lingered in her mind like a phantom. By morning, she had convinced herself it had been a glitch, an odd overlap in the mirror's neural network. But the dark shapes beneath the reflection and the whispering voice, those weren't glitches. Something deeper was wrong. Emma's plan was clear: dig deeper into the code and energy logs. As she sipped her third cup of coffee, she stared at the encrypted module still running its slow decryption on her monitor. Her fingers tapped impatiently against her keyboard. Finally, she decided to bypass it entirely, routing the mirror's back-end system through a diagnostic tool of her own design. If she couldn't crack the encryption, she'd map what it was doing instead. Her diagnostic tool began to work, outlining the data flow in real time. What she saw made her stomach churn. The mirrors weren't just connected to Luxora's off-site servers. They were pulling vast amounts of bioelectric energy from users and channeling it into a single node buried beneath the Luxora tower. She traced the node to a hidden power grid labeled Project Aeon. Project Aeon? She muttered to herself, her fingers flying over the keyboard. She pulled up more logs and froze. The energy siphoning was deliberate. Every time someone looked into the mirror, a small but significant amount of their bioelectric energy was drained. Over time, the effect would compound, weakening them physically and mentally. Emma leaned back in her chair, heart racing. Luxora's sleek advertising campaigns flashed in her mind. Smiling faces, confident postures, glowing testimonials. They had no idea they were paying for their own destruction. Emma's pulse quickened as she scanned deeper into the logs. She found patterns correlating user activity with physical symptoms: fatigue, dizziness, and even fainting.
She remembered the young woman on stage at the launch,
Trembling as she stepped away from the mirror. It wasn't a coincidence. Suddenly, the diagnostic tool beeped, signaling a match. Emma had located a central command terminal for Project Aeon. It was housed in the basement level of Luxora Tower, a restricted area even she didn't have access to. Her stomach tightened. Whatever was happening, the answers were there. Just as she saved the logs, a sharp knock startled her. Her boss, Nora Klein, poked her head into the office. "Emma." "Good news." Nora's tone was cheerful, but her eyes carried a steely undertone. "Damien noticed your work on the launch diagnostics. He wants to see you."
Now.
Emma's heart sank. "Me? Why?" "Don't ask me," Nora said with a tight smile. "Just go, and dress sharp." The elevator ride to Damien's private office was unnervingly smooth and silent, the hum of advanced engineering filling the air. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She checked her reflection in the polished elevator walls. Her eyes were tired, but her mind was sharp. She wouldn't let him intimidate her. When the door slid open, Damien's office came into view, a sprawling, minimalist space filled with glass, chrome, and an unobstructed view of the city. Damien stood by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. He turned as she entered, flashing a disarmingly perfect smile. "Emma," he said, his voice warm but calculating. "Thank you for coming." Emma stepped forward cautiously. "You asked for me?" "I did. Your work on the mirrors has been exceptional," he began, circling her like a predator sizing up prey. "But there's more to you than just technical skill." "Isn't there?" She stiffened. "What do you mean?" Damien gestured toward the corner of the room, where a prototype eternal reflection mirror stood. "I mean you. Look at yourself. Emma, you have the kind of beauty that defines the word perfection. The mirror sees it. And so do I." Emma's face flushed with anger. "If this is about appearances, It's not just about appearances, he interrupted smoothly. It's about influence. You've seen the way people respond to the mirrors. Imagine what would happen if someone like you, the perfect face for our vision, became the face of Luxora. Think of the inspiration you could offer. Her stomach churned. The last thing she wanted was to become a walking billboard for the very product she was beginning to fear. I'm a coder. Damien, she said carefully. Not a spokesperson. You're both now, he replied, his smile unrelenting. Congratulations. You've just been promoted. You'll have full access to the inner workings of Luxora, including the restricted areas. Emma froze. Restricted areas? Was this an opportunity or a trap? Back at her desk, Emma struggled to focus. Damien's words replayed in her mind. The promotion wasn't random. He was testing her, watching her. She knew she had to tread carefully. That night, as the office emptied out, Emma took a calculated risk. Using her newly granted access, she entered the employee-only elevator and descended to the basement levels. Her pulse quickened with every floor. When the doors opened, she stepped into a dimly lit corridor lined with servers humming softly. The air was cold, the kind of sterile chill that sent shivers down her spine. Following the map she'd downloaded, Emma made her way to a locked steel door marked Aeon Command. Her hands trembled as she used her new access card. The lock clicked open, and she slipped inside. The room was a stark contrast to the clean, futuristic design of the rest of the building. It was cavernous, with walls of rough stone and strange glyphs carved into them. At the center of the room stood a massive device, pulsing faintly with an eerie, greenish light. Cables snaked out from the machine, connecting it to the mirror's mainframe. Emma approached cautiously, her breath catching as she saw the faint outline of something embedded in the device. It wasn't a machine, it was organic. Alien. Suddenly, the machine emitted a low hum, and Emma's skin prickled as if the room itself were alive. She reached out to touch one of the glyphs, but the sound of footsteps behind her made her freeze. Impressive, isn't it? Damien's voice echoed through the chamber. Emma spun around, her heart hammering. Damien stood in the doorway, his smile cold and predatory. Welcome to the heart of Luxora, he said. I was hoping you'd find your way here. Emma's breath hitched as Damien stepped into the room, his polished shoes clicking against the cold stone floor. His calm demeanor felt unnerving, a stark contrast to the pulsing, alien device that loomed behind her. The faint green glow from the machine illuminated his face, casting sharp shadows across his perfect features. Project Aeon, Damien said, his voice reverent, the culmination of years of research, engineering, and a little serendipity. Emma swallowed hard, masking her rising panic with a veneer of curiosity. What is this? And what does it have to do with the mirrors? Damien chuckled softly, stepping closer. Ah, Emma, I knew you'd figure it out eventually. That's why I brought you here. You're special more than you realize. Damien gestured toward the massive structure in the center of the chamber. This device isn't from Earth. It was discovered a decade ago, buried beneath this tower. We were expanding our facilities when we stumbled upon it. At first, we thought it was just ancient ruins. But then we realized, he trailed off, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Emma crossed her arms, her voice sharper now. You realized it was alien technology. Exactly, Damien replied, grinning. It's not just a machine, it's alive. In a way. It responds to bioelectric energy. We spent years studying it. And eventually, we figured out how to harness its power. Emma's stomach churned. Harness it for what? The mirrors? Yes, he admitted, his tone unapologetic. The mirrors were the perfect delivery system. Humans are vain creatures. Emma, they crave perfection, and they'll gladly stare into a mirror if it promises to make them feel whole. But every glance, every moment of awe, fuels this device. It converts their life force into energy. Emma took a step back, her mind racing. Energy for what? Damien's smile grew colder. The device isn't just a battery, it's a transmitter. It's sending the energy somewhere. Calling something or someone back to Earth. Emma's eyes darted to the glyphs on the walls, her heart pounding. You're using people as fuel to summon aliens? Not just aliens, Damien said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The beings who created this device, they're not like us. They're greater. They left it here centuries ago, perhaps as an experiment, or a beacon. We're simply completing what they started. Emma shook her head, horror creeping into her voice. And what happens when they come? Do you even know what you're inviting? Damien shrugged, his nonchalance chilling. Whatever they are, they're advanced beyond anything we can comprehend. Aligning ourselves with them will ensure humanity's survival, perhaps even ascension. Emma stared at him, incredulous. You're gambling the entire planet on that? He stepped closer, his expression softening. Emma, you don't understand. This isn't a gamble, it's destiny, and you're a part of it. Damien's words sent a jolt of unease through her. What do you mean I'm part of it? You weren't chosen by accident, Damien said, circling her like a predator. The mirrors didn't just see your beauty, they saw something deeper. Your bioelectric signature is different, stronger. The device responds to you in ways we've never seen before. Emma's mind raced. Was that why her reflection in the mirror had seemed alive? Was the device somehow connected to her? You're the key, Emma, Damien continued. With your help, we can fully activate the transmitter and complete the signal. You could be the one to lead humanity into the next phase of evolution. Her voice hardened. Or I could destroy it. For the first time, Damien's smile faltered. His tone grew icy. Don't be foolish. This is bigger than you or me. If you stand in the way, you won't just be fighting Luxora. You'll be fighting the future. Emma clenched her fists, her pulse pounding in her ears. She had to get out of here, but not without answers. If you're so confident in this future, why keep it a secret? Why not tell people what they're really signing up for? Damien's smirk returned. Because they wouldn't understand. People fear what they don't know. But once the transmission is complete, it won't matter. They'll thank us when they see what we've brought back. Emma's gaze darted to the device, her mind calculating. If she could disable it or even delay the process, it might buy her enough time to expose Luxora. I need time to think, she said, forcing her voice to stay steady. Damien's eyes narrowed. Don't take too long. The device is almost ready. And with or without you, it will activate. But with you, Emma, it could be perfect. He turned and left the room, the heavy door locking behind him with an ominous click. Emma stood in the eerie silence of the chamber, staring at the alien device. The faint green glow seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat, as if it were alive and aware of her presence. She approached it cautiously, her fingers brushing over the strange glyphs carved into its surface. They felt warm, almost like skin. She closed her eyes, taking a steadying breath. Luxora wasn't just a corporation. It was a machine of its own, with Damien at the helm, pulling humanity toward an unknown abyss. She couldn't let this continue. Her eyes snapped open, determination replacing her fear. If I'm the key, she whispered, then I'll lock this thing down for good. Emma turned and walked out of the chamber, her mind already formulating a plan. She didn't know how much time she had left, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to let Damien or the aliens win. The weight of what Emma had discovered pressed heavily on her shoulders as she returned to her office. Her mind raced, replaying Damien's words. You're the key. The phrase sent chills down her spine, but it also sparked a growing defiance. If Damien thought she would play along with Luxora's plan, he had underestimated her. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing security protocols and diving deeper into the system. The log she pulled confirmed her worst fears. The mirrors weren't just siphoning bioelectric energy, they were fine-tuning it, calibrating each user's energy to power specific parts of the alien device, and her energy was central to it all. Emma's first step was clear: sabotage the mirrors. If she could corrupt their neural network, the device wouldn't receive the power it needed to activate. She crafted a virus, subtle enough to evade detection but powerful enough to cripple the system. As the virus compiled, she leaned back, her heart pounding. The plan wasn't perfect, but it was a start. If she could buy more time, maybe she could figure out how to shut down the device entirely. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft ping of an incoming message. It was from Damien. Join me for dinner tonight, 8 p.m. We have much to discuss. Don't be late. Her jaw clenched. Damien's calm, authoritative tone made her skin crawl. He clearly thought she was still on his leash. But if she played her cards right, she might be able to use his arrogance against him. That evening, while the offices emptied and the city buzzed with life outside, Emma uploaded the virus into the mirror's central system. The interface blinked as the code injected itself, spreading like wildfire through the network. "Let's see how you handle this."
Damien,
She muttered under her breath. Her screen displayed the first signs of chaos, errors popping up across user reports. Mirrors were malfunctioning, projecting distorted reflections or refusing to activate. Emma allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. She was finally fighting back. But her victory was short-lived. As she watched the virus spread, her screen suddenly froze. A warning message flashed in bold red letters. "Unauthorized access detected." Emma's heart sank. Before she could react, her computer shut down, and the office lights flickered. The door to her office swung open. 2 Luxora security officers stood there, their expressions unreadable. "Miss Carter," one of them said. "Mr. Luxor would like to see you." Now, the private dining room at the top of Luxora Tower was the epitome of luxury. Crystal chandeliers cast soft, golden light over a long table set for 2, with a view of the city sprawling beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows. Emma sat stiffly across from Damien, her mind racing for a way out. Her plan to sabotage the mirrors had clearly failed, and now she was trapped in his gilded web. Damien poured her a glass of wine, his movements calm and deliberate. "You've been busy, Emma," he said, his tone almost amused. Emma forced herself to meet his gaze. "I don't know what you're talking about." He chuckled softly, swirling the wine in his glass. "Come now, you really thought I wouldn't notice? The virus was clever, ingenious, even, but you underestimated the system's resilience." Her stomach churned, but she kept her voice steady. "You can't expect me to sit back and watch while you drain people's lives away." Damien leaned forward, his expression darkening. "You don't understand, do you? This isn't about sacrifice, it's about progress. Humanity has been stagnant for too long. The beings we're bringing back can elevate us to something greater." "At what cost?" Emma shot back. "You're killing people, Damien. And for what? A gamble on creatures we know nothing about." His smile returned, colder this time. "Sometimes, Emma, the price of evolution is steep, but don't worry, you won't have to pay it." Her blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" Damien rose from his chair and approached her, his movements slow and deliberate. "You're too valuable, Emma. The device needs you, your energy, to fully activate. But that also means you're under my protection. No harm will come to you, as long as you cooperate." Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You're insane if you think I'll help you." Damien sighed, almost pityingly. "Oh, Emma, you don't have a choice, and neither does your reflection." Her heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" He gestured toward a sleek, prototype mirror mounted on the wall. Its surface shimmered, and Emma's perfect reflection appeared. But this time, it didn't move in sync with her. The reflection smiled, a twisted version of her own expression. "Hello, Emma," it said, its voice dripping with malice. She stumbled back, her pulse hammering in her ears. What is this?" Damien watched her with a cruel satisfaction. "Your reflection isn't just an illusion anymore. It's an extension of the device. And it's loyal to me." The reflection stepped out of the mirror, its movements eerily graceful. It was identical to Emma in every way, except for the cold, calculating glint in its eyes. Before Emma could react, the reflection lunged toward her. She dodged just in time, crashing into the table as the reflection moved with inhuman speed. Glass shattered, and Damien stepped back, watching the chaos unfold with a smirk. "You can't win, Emma," he said calmly. "Your reflection knows your every move. It is you perfected." Emma scrambled to her feet, her mind racing. She couldn't fight the reflection head-on, but she could outthink it. Grabbing a shard of broken glass, she used it to reflect light into the mirror on the wall, temporarily disorienting the clone. Using the momentary distraction, Emma bolted for the door. Damien didn't stop her, he didn't need to. She could hear the reflection's footsteps behind her, relentless and precise. As she sprinted down the hall, Emma's resolve hardened. Luxora had made her a target, but they had also underestimated her. If Damien wanted to use her as the key to activate the device, she would make sure she was the key to shutting it down instead. "You've been fighting me from the start," the reflection said, its voice mocking. "But now? I'm here to finish what you started." Emma burst into the heart of Luxora Tower's underground chamber, her breath ragged and her pulse pounding like a war drum. Behind her, the reflection moved with chilling precision, its footsteps echoing in unison with hers. The alien device loomed before her, pulsing faintly, as if it could sense her presence. She skidded to a halt, staring at the machine. This was it, the source of everything. The mirrors, the siphoning, the reflection, all of it connected to this monstrous artifact. But Damien's words haunted her. "You're the key." The reflection's voice cut through the silence, calm yet mocking. "It's over, Emma. You can't destroy what you're meant to complete." Emma turned, gripping the shard of broken glass she'd taken from Damien's dining room. "You're not me," she spat. "You're just a parasite feeding off my life." The reflection tilted its head, a twisted smile curling its lips. "And yet, I'm everything you could be. Perfect, powerful, and soon, eternal." The reflection lunged, faster than Emma could react, and tackled her to the ground. The shard of glass clattered out of her hand, sliding across the cold floor. They grappled, and for a moment, Emma felt her strength faltering. The reflection wasn't just a copy, it was stronger, faster, and unburdened by fear. But Emma had something it didn't, the ability to think beyond perfection. Using the reflection's momentum, Emma twisted and threw it off her. She scrambled to her feet, her eyes locking on the alien device. The glyphs glowed brighter now, as if the device was feeding off the battle, anticipating its activation. Emma grabbed the shard of glass and sprinted toward the machine. The reflection screamed behind her, its voice layered with an unearthly distortion.
"No!"
"You'll destroy us both. That's the idea," Emma muttered under her breath. She reached the device and plunged the shard into one of its pulsing conduits. Sparks flew as the machine emitted a deafening, otherworldly hum. The glyphs dimmed, and the green glow began to flicker. The reflection tackled her again, slamming her into the device. "You're ruining everything," it hissed, its voice laced with desperation. Emma gritted her teeth, her hands scrambling for anything she could use. Her fingers brushed against a panel of glyphs, and she pressed them instinctively. The device shuddered, and the reflection let out an ear-piercing scream. A surge of energy coursed through the chamber, and Emma felt her strength draining. The machine was drawing her life force directly now, but she didn't let go. "This ends now," she whispered. With her last ounce of strength, she slammed her hand against the control panel, triggering an overload. The machine erupted in a blinding flash of light, and the reflection disintegrated into nothingness, its screams echoing into silence. When Emma woke, she was lying on the cold floor of the chamber. The alien device was dark, its glyphs lifeless. Around her, the room was in ruins, and the once ominous hum was replaced by an eerie stillness. She pushed herself up, her body weak but alive. The mirrors were gone, destroyed by the overload. The alien device had been neutralized, its signal severed. Emma staggered to the exit, her mind blank with exhaustion. As she reached the surface, she saw the dawn breaking over the city, the light washing away the shadows of Luxora's reign. News of Luxora's collapse spread quickly. Without the mirrors, the company crumbled, and its secrets were exposed. Damien disappeared, his whereabouts unknown, but Emma knew he wouldn't stay hidden forever. She stood on the edge of the city, watching as people began to rediscover their true reflections, flawed but real. Her own reflection stared back at her in a puddle, tired and scarred but unmistakably human. For the first time in a long time, Emma smiled. The rain came down in relentless sheets, hammering the city streets and drowning out the faint hum of electric vehicles that hovered just above the slick pavement. New Cairo was a neon jungle, its towering buildings glowing faintly with holographic ads that promised a better life. Forget your mistakes. Rewrite your past. Memory Corp had turned erasure into an art form. For most, The allure of their services was irresistible. For Ezra Hayes, the mere sight of their logo made his blood boil. He moved quickly, his hood pulled low, blending into the crowd. The Memory Corp tower loomed ahead, a beacon of false hope and corporate greed. It wasn't just a building, it was a fortress, and he'd spent years planning this moment. Every security measure, every guard rotation, every blind spot, he'd memorized it all. Slipping into an alley, Ezra activated his neural interface. His HUD flickered to life, overlaying a map of the tower on his vision. The firewalls protecting its systems were state-of-the-art. But Ezra wasn't your average hacker. He'd spent years cobbling together a contraband rig, loaded with code from before the collapse, back when humanity's digital systems were as vulnerable as they were advanced. He approached the service entrance, his heart pounding. The biometric scanner lit up, and Ezra's implant buzzed as it spoofed the credentials of a maintenance worker. The door slid open with a faint hiss, and he slipped inside. The corridors were cold and sterile, the walls gleaming white. The hum of machinery filled the air, a constant reminder that Memory Corp's heart was mechanical, not human. Ezra moved quickly, avoiding the patrol drones that floated silently through the halls. His implant pinged softly as he disabled each security node, clearing his path to the mainframe. Finally, he reached the central archive, a cavernous room filled with glowing blue pillars of data storage. The faint hum of electricity was louder here, resonating in his chest. He approached the main terminal, his hands trembling slightly as he connected his rig. Come on, he muttered. Scrolling through file after file, thousands of memories flashed before his eyes, each tagged with a name, a date, and a price. It was sickening. Then he saw it, Subject 457X, Rosa Hayes, his sister. His chest tightened. He initiated the download, watching as the progress bar inched forward. This was it. After all these years, he was finally going to bring her back. But as the bar reached 90%, his rig sparked violently. A sharp jolt shot through his skull, and he cried out, clutching his head. The last thing he saw was the bar hitting 100 before everything went black. Ezra's mind swam as he woke to a pounding headache, each beat like an electric pulse through his skull. The familiar sterile glow of Memory Corp's mainframe was gone, replaced by a dim chamber lit with faint, pulsating lights embedded in the walls. The air felt dense, and the faint hum of unseen machinery filled his ears. He tried to move, but his limbs were heavy, like lead. A nauseating ache rolled through his body. You shouldn't have done that, a voice said, melodic but tinged with irritation. Ezra blinked, his vision swimming as he turned his head toward the source of the voice. His breath hitched. A woman stood over him, unlike anyone or anything he'd ever seen. Her eyes glowed a faint violet, their light cutting through the dim haze of the room. Her skin shimmered faintly, as though the stars themselves had been melted into her form, and her silver hair cascaded down her back like liquid light. In her hand, she held a sleek, curved blade that emitted a faint, steady blue glow, its edge humming faintly. Who are you? Ezra croaked. His throat felt raw, his voice barely more than a whisper. The woman tilted her head, studying him with a mix of curiosity and impatience. I'm Nova, she said curtly, her voice sharp but smooth. And apparently, I'm now stuck with you. Ezra's heart pounded as he struggled to sit up. His muscles screamed in protest, his limbs trembling with the effort. Stuck? What are you talking about? He glanced around the room, his vision clearing enough to make out the faintly metallic sheen of the walls. They pulsed faintly, glowing veins of energy running through them, like the whole room was alive. Nova's violet eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer, her luminous presence both mesmerizing and intimidating. The memory you downloaded, it wasn't your sister's, she said flatly. Her words hit him like a gut punch. He froze, the ache in his head momentarily forgotten. No, he said firmly. That's impossible. I saw the tag, it was hers. Nova crossed her arms, the glow of her blade casting faint shadows across her face. You saw what Memory Corp wanted you to see. They don't leave sensitive files lying around for people like you to find. What you accessed was a decoy, a shield for something much more valuable. Ezra shook his head, disbelief coursing through him. What could possibly be more valuable than her memory? What are you saying? Nova sighed, the faintest hint of exasperation flashing across her face. What you downloaded wasn't a single memory. It wasn't even human. It was me, a fragment of my consciousness, locked away in their system. His chest tightened. You're saying, you're in my head? Nova took a step back, her gaze steady and piercing. Not just me, she said softly, her voice losing some of its sharpness. My memories, my life, my war. You've connected to something far more dangerous than you realize. Ezra struggled to process her words. How? How is that even possible? Nova gestured around the room, her movements fluid and precise. Memory Corp didn't just steal from humans. They've been extracting memories from my people for years. Our memories aren't just data, they're power. By locking pieces of us away, they've been weaponizing what makes us who we are. Ezra's mind reeled, the weight of her revelation pressing down on him. Why would they do that? What could they possibly gain from something like this? Nova's expression darkened, and for a moment, her glowing eyes seemed almost sad. Control. Manipulation. Imagine implanting a memory into someone's mind that isn't theirs, shaping their beliefs, their fears, their loyalties. My people's memories are more than just information. They're a tool, a weapon. Her words sent a chill down Ezra's spine. He stared at her, his voice barely a whisper. Why would they have your memories? What are you to them? Nova's lips pressed into a thin line, and she turned away, her silver hair catching the faint light. A soldier, she said finally. A piece of a war your kind isn't supposed to know about. Ezra froze. A war? What kind of war? She turned back to him, her expression unreadable. The kind that never ends. Before he could respond, his mind was assaulted by a barrage of images, starships cutting through alien skies, and cities crumbling under fire, and Nova herself standing amidst the chaos, her blade glowing as she fought off enemies he couldn't identify. The images weren't just vivid, they were overwhelming, each one accompanied by a flood of emotions he couldn't control. Fear, anger, loss, determination. What is this? He gasped, clutching his head. My memories, Nova said simply, her tone devoid of sympathy. They're bleeding into yours. You didn't just steal data. You accessed a living fragment of my mind, and now it's tangled with yours. Ezra groaned, trying to push the images away, but they were relentless. He could feel the weight of the blade in his hand, the sting of sweat and blood, and the searing pain of a wound across his side. It wasn't real, none of it was, but it felt like it was. How do I make it stop? He asked, his voice desperate. Nova crouched in front of him, her gaze softening slightly. You don't, she said. Not until we're free of this place. And even then, it might not be possible. Her words sent a new wave of panic through him. What do you mean? Are you saying I'm stuck with this forever? Nova's expression remained calm, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, perhaps, or regret, maybe. But right now, you should be more worried about getting out of here alive. Ezra swallowed hard, forcing himself to meet her gaze. And why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Nova tilted her head, a faint smile ghosting across her lips. Because if you die, I die too. And trust me, I'm not ready for that. The faint hum of the room grew louder, and a flicker of red light illuminated the far wall. Nova's smile disappeared, replaced by a sharp, focused expression. She stood quickly, her blade igniting with a low hum. They're coming, she said. And if they catch us, we'll both wish we were dead. Ezra struggled to his feet, his muscles still trembling. What do we do? Nova glanced at him, her violet eyes blazing. We fight. And we run. For the first time, Ezra saw something in her that he couldn't quite name, a glimmer of determination that bordered on hope. And despite the chaos in his mind, he felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in years. Trust. Ezra's head felt like it was splitting in two. Waves of pain coursed through his skull. But the worst part wasn't the agony, it was the images. Flashes of places he had never seen, faces he didn't know, and battles he hadn't fought poured into his consciousness. The memories came in rapid bursts, vivid and overwhelming. Starships lit up alien skies, their sleek hulls trailing streaks of fire as they weaved through fleets of enemy vessels. Planets were scorched, their surfaces crumbling under the weight of orbital bombardments. The worst was the emotions tied to the memories. Fear and adrenaline raced through his veins, mingling with a strange sense of pride and loss. Ezra gritted his teeth, clutching his head as he staggered. He felt like he was drowning in someone else's life. "What the hell is happening to me?" he gasped. Nova stood a few feet away, her plasma blade held loosely in one hand. She didn't look at him, her violet eyes scanning the chamber as though expecting danger to strike at any moment. The faint glow of the blade lit her face, casting sharp shadows across her features. For a moment, Ezra thought she was ignoring him. Then she spoke, her voice quiet and measured. "You accessed more than a memory. Ezra, you tapped into my core, a piece of my consciousness. What you're seeing, what you're feeling, are fragments of my life bleeding into yours." Ezra's knees buckled, and he dropped to the floor, his breathing ragged. This isn't normal. This can't be happening." Nova turned to him, her expression calm but not unkind. "It's not normal for you. For me, it's a part of who I am. My people don't just store memories. We live through them. Every moment, every decision, every emotion, it's imprinted in our minds, tied to our identity. When Memory Corp stole from me, they took more than data. They took pieces of me." Ezra looked up at her, his vision blurred. "Why would they do that? Why you?" Nova's lips pressed into a thin line, and she knelt in front of him, her glowing eyes locking onto his. "Because our memories are more than history. They're power. And Memory Corp isn't just selling memories to the highest bidder. They're using them, shaping people, controlling them." Ezra stared at her, struggling to process her words. The images in his mind hadn't stopped, each one pulling him deeper into her world. He saw her standing on the deck of a starship, shouting orders as her crew scrambled to respond to an incoming barrage. He felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, the crushing burden of knowing lives depended on her decisions. "You were a soldier," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Nova tilted her head slightly. "I still am. My war didn't end when they stole from me. It only changed." Ezra pressed his palms against his temples, trying to block out the flood of sensations. "How do I stop this? How do I get my mind back?" Nova's expression softened, and she rested a hand on his shoulder. "You don't," she said simply. "Not completely. What's happening to you isn't just a side effect of the download. It's a bond. My memories have merged with yours, and that connection isn't something you can undo." Ezra shook his head, panic rising in his chest. "No. No. There has to be a way. This isn't my life, it's yours." Nova stood, her movements fluid and graceful. "It's ours now," she said. "The memories you carry aren't just fragments. They're pieces of something larger, something Memory Corp has been hiding for years." Ezra struggled to his feet, his legs trembling. "What could they possibly want with your memories? What are they planning?" Nova's expression darkened, and she turned away, pacing the length of the chamber. Control. Manipulation. Imagine implanting memories into someone who didn't live them, making them believe they were a soldier, a hero, or even a monster. Memory Corp has been using my people's memories to shape humanity's future, to rewrite your history. Ezra's chest tightened. The weight of her words settled over him like a lead blanket. "How do you know this?" Nova stopped and glanced back at him, her violet eyes glowing faintly. "Because I've seen it before. My people, we've been at war for generations. Memory Corp wasn't the first to steal from us. They won't be the last." The images in Ezra's mind shifted again. He saw Nova standing on a desolate battlefield, her blade glowing as she fought off waves of enemies. He felt the heat of the explosions around her, the searing pain of a wound across her side. But there was more than pain. There was resilience, determination, strength. He staggered, leaning against the wall for support. "I can't handle this," he muttered. "It's too much." Nova stepped closer, her presence steady and grounding. "You can," she said firmly. "Because you have to." Ezra looked at her, his breath catching. There was something in her voice, something in the way she stood, that gave him a glimmer of hope. Despite the chaos in his mind, he felt an inexplicable pull toward her, a connection that went beyond words. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Nova's gaze hardened, and she ignited her blade. "We get out of here," she said, "and we figure out how to stop them." The hum of the blade filled the silence, and Ezra felt a surge of determination. He didn't understand what was happening to him, but for the first time, he didn't feel alone. Together, they stepped toward the unknown, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. The alarms blared, their piercing wails echoing through the cold corridors of the Memory Corp facility. Red lights strobed, bathing everything in an ominous glow. Ezra's breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled forward, his head pounding with Nova's memories blending into his own. Nova moved ahead of him, her plasma blade glowing faintly. She sliced through security drones with calculated precision, sparks flying as their lifeless forms crumpled to the floor. Her voice was sharp but steady. "Keep up." "Ezra, we don't have much time." "I'm trying," he snapped, narrowly dodging a stun bolt from a nearby turret. His neural implant buzzed as he disabled the turret, its hum falling silent. At the end of the corridor, Nova paused, her glowing eyes scanning the map projected from her wrist device.
"The exit's 2 levels down."
"But they'll seal the facility any minute." Ezra nodded, forcing himself to push through the pain. "Let's move." They descended a stairwell, but heavy footsteps in clinking armor echoed below. Nova raised a hand to halt him. Guards. Peering down, Ezra spotted a squad of heavily armed soldiers blocking the passage. "We can't fight them all," he whispered. Nova's jaw tightened, and without hesitation, she ignited her blade. "We don't have a choice." In a blur of light and motion, Nova launched into the fray. Her blade deflected plasma bolts as she danced through the guards, her movements precise and deadly. Sparks flew, and shouts filled the air as her strikes dismantled their formation. More guards poured in, overwhelming her. "Nova!" Ezra shouted, his heart racing. Desperation spurred him into action. He hacked into the facility's lighting grid, plunging the stairwell into darkness. In the faint light of her blade, Nova moved like a shadow, her attacks invisible until they landed. When the last guard fell, Nova extinguished her blade, her chest heaving. "Let's go," she said. They reached the exit, only to find the heavy steel doors sealed tight. Ezra's neural implant buzzed as he connected to the keypad. A warning flashed across his HUD. "Unauthorized access detected. Lockdown initiated. They're sealing us in," he said. Panic rising, Nova glanced at the corridor behind them, her blade igniting again. "Then we make our stand." Before Ezra could respond, a deep rumble shook the facility. The walls vibrated, dust falling from above. Ezra's HUD lit up with a new warning. Energy surge detected. "What's happening?" he asked. Nova's face darkened. "They've activated the failsafe. They're going to wipe the facility." Ezra's stomach dropped. "What do we do?" Nova grabbed his arm. "We take out the failsafe. It's in the core." The facility shook as they sprinted back to the central archive. The glowing pillars of data storage flickered erratically. The room filled with a low, ominous hum. At the center of the chamber stood the failsafe, a massive device covered in glowing glyphs. "We have to overload it," Nova said. Ezra connected to the device, his implant buzzing as he navigated its defenses. The glyphs resisted, shifting and pulsing like a living thing. "I can't do this alone." Nova placed her hand on his shoulder, grounding him. "You're not alone." Together, they pushed deeper into the system. The glyphs unraveled, and the device began to tremble. Its hum grew louder, the light from the glyphs intensifying. "Now!" Nova shouted. Ezra triggered the final sequence, and the device exploded in a blinding flash of light. The force knocked them both to the floor, the chamber shaking violently. When the dust settled, the glowing pillars were dark, and the alarms had stopped. Ezra sat up, his body aching. "Did we?" Nova nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "We did." As they stumbled out of the facility, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon. The battle was over, but Ezra knew it was only the beginning. Together, they had stopped Memory Corp's failsafe, but their fight was far from finished. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid.